For me, my background is mechanical and manufacturing engineering. And there was one time I had a job where my desk was right next to the manufacturing floor. I had fluorescent lights and people were coming in all the time. For some reason, arguments were always happening then around me in the office. And there was a time where I just got so overwhelmed, I made the request to move my desk, right? I said, I know other people can handle this, but I can't handle this.
Hmm.
And I'm overstimulated, so it's affecting my work. And if you really want me to perform well, this would be the best solution.
How much courage did that take to speak up?
Yeah, so this is where we can get into my side of the story. Neurodiversity or neurodivergence tends to run in families. So sometimes you'll see parents or grandparents with similar conditions. I grew up with my sister expressing very different traits, and then she got diagnosed with autism while we were in high school. And in that time, people always said we were kind of similar, but I just got labeled as being good at math. I wasn't necessarily given this label of being autistic, which it can come with pros and cons, right? I think I saw my sister deal with some self-esteem issues that happen, especially at that time when you're a teenager. And so for me, I went to college. I moved to Mexico. I lived there for 3 years. And I moved back to the US, still working as an engineer and not aware that there was a little bit more going on than just me being different. I knew that I could do my work really well, but I didn't realize that something like sitting next to the manufacturing floor would actually give me anxiety, you know? It got to a point where I felt like I was going to throw up going into work because I couldn't handle everything happening around me. And at that time, I didn't have a diagnosis. So all I did was I went into human resources and I said, this is what I think I need. Can you accommodate it? And they said no.
What happened next? They said
Yeah.
no, then what happened?
Yeah. And so frankly, that type of experience, it snowballed. And after realizing what my body was telling me about going into work every day, I just decided that I wasn't meant to be in that environment and I left.
And what a shame because you were so good at your job and the fix was so simple.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the solution is so simple if we can be flexible in our approach.
And ultimately, I'm incredibly grateful for the experience because then I took more time to learn about myself, get a diagnosis,
Mm.
and I started my company.
And tell us a little bit about your company.
Yeah. So, empathic engineering, it is inspired by the research I did about development of empathy in engineers. And I started to realize as I worked in international settings that a lot of our frustration would come from misunderstanding. And I think it goes back to neurodivergence. It can also be seen if someone speaks a different native language than you. So it became very obvious to me that we would spend a lot of time in meetings. For example, when I lived in Mexico, we would meet with the team in the US and then the meeting is in English because everyone at the company, I was at Ford down in Mexico, everyone there is expected to speak English.
Mm.
And what would happen was the whole team in the US sort of dominated the meeting. They just naturally would give the native English speaker pause, I call it. So it's asking a question, maybe you wait 2 seconds, and then you're going to get almost always another native English speaker that's answering. If you don't recognize that it always takes us a few seconds to translate from one language to another and then formulate a response to translate back. So that type of tendency, then it would cause us to end a meeting in English We hang up, and then everyone in Mexico were talking in Spanish. We solved part of the problem. And I'm sitting there like, well, now the other half of the team doesn't know because you didn't say it during the meeting, right? Super confused until I started to recognize there were tools that we could use. Sharing your meeting notes while people are talking. That's an incredibly useful one because some of us learn auditory, some learn with visual cues, and others kinesthetic.
Mhm.
And the more ways that we can incorporate this type of skill into the workplace, for me, the less stressed we are, the happier we are going into work, and the more money we save because we solve problems.
I often find when you make these flexible changes to better accommodate one aspect of diversity, in this case, you were talking about non-English, native English speakers who have to translate in their head. It takes them a little bit of time. Chances are it's also helping to accommodate your introverts who maybe don't like to just be the
Mhm.
first one to speak up. They want to process a little bit and then chime in. So there's all sorts of benefits when we can, you know, create the environment for people to speak up to say what they need to better participate and then be flexible.
Mhm.